I guess a common assumption would be that there was a lot of music in your house growing up. Do you have an earliest musical memory?
I really don't. I mean, in my family, the day-to-day living meant that there was music being played. My dad was in the hospital when I was about 6 or 7 years old. That was around 1953, and from that point on, we would bring him home every week and play him the records that were coming out with his songs that were recorded around the world, in all these different languages. So my first real musical memories are those of playing my dad's songs for him when he would come to the house.
So how old do you think you would have been when it started to dawn on you, or it started to gel that what an important figure your dad was?
Well, I realized pretty quickly. I was going to concerts and to, like parties and things where my mom was taking us around to events that had something to do with my dad, or whether it was his friends that were singing, like Pete Seeger or people like that. And every one of them, was, I guess, somebody who liked my dad's stuff or knew him or was friends or something like that. And of course, as a kid, I didn't pay much attention to it. I was just there, playing with some of the other folks' kids, Pete Seeger's kids or something. We were all sort of thrown in the corner and say, go play with each other. And so we never actually sat around thinking about how important our parents were.
Was he forthcoming to you with a lot of advice with regard to music?
I don't think so. I think my dad and my mom, whenever they got together and I was there, were more interested in talking to each other and catching up with each other on things that were going on in life. And, every once in a while, my dad would, be paying attention to me and show me a couple of chords or something like that on the guitar, but we never sat down and had any big philosophical discussions about folk music or anything else.
Were you always going to be headed for a career in music? Was there another career path that you were interested in?
I was never headed for a career in music. In our family, everybody grew up playing music, and it was assumed that music would always be a part of our lives, much in the same way that for most people, at least years ago, before radios and, recorded music, everybody sat around playing music, and the songs, were handed down from generation to generation, but nobody was a professional, or at least most people weren't. And in that sense, we grew up singing the songs and playing the music that had been sung in our family for generations, and especially because of my dad, we were learning songs from other people and other traditions, and we just thought that we would always do that with our friends when we got home from a real job. Nobody thought we were going to end up doing this professionally.
When you did start recording and performing, did you feel any pressure on you to live up to the family name?
Well, luckily for me, the very first thing I ever recorded was a thing called Alice's Restaurant, and it was so popular. In terms of sales alone, had sold more in 1 year than my dad's records had sold in his entire lifetime. Yeah. And it was just, it wasn't that it was better or anything like that. It was just the times had changed and marketing had developed, and there was more people in the world or whatever. And so even though there were people trying to, I guess, compare, the relative importance of one person or another, I realized pretty quick that you can't do that. And no one can do that. There's nobody who's really more important or less important than anybody else. There are songs that mean things to people. It's almost like the background of your life is playing, and when an important event happens in your life, the music that's playing becomes a part of your life. Every time you hear it, it brings you back to that moment. And there were so many people for whom Alice's Restaurant and some of the other early songs of mine had become part of the fabric of their lives, just incidentally, not because it had any value, that I never, for those people, there are many of them who'd never even heard of my dad.
I read you quoted in other interviews stating that Alice's Restaurant was an attempt by yourself to use humour to deal with the issue of war in Vietnam. How important to you is humour in music?
Well, I just always thought that a good sense of humor was a major tool in the struggle, of trying to be happy. And without it, you're sort of doomed to some kind of, unsmiling world where not only are you not happy with yourself, but other people are not happy to see you coming. So, for me, I mean, even without being a singer, I loved hearing the songs or the stories or seeing the movies or whatever, of my life that had a sense of humor, that had some kind of intelligent sense of humor too, not just poking fun at somebody or something like that, but I love the sort of twists in the stories and in the mysteries, or in the events that take place that you really can't invent in your mind. It's almost dealing with the sort of truth that truth is stranger than fiction, and when you tell it right and you put it in the right perspective, it becomes something that really sets well in the hearts of people who are listening to it. And I always loved that stuff myself, and it found a place in me. And because I was telling the truth and not making up things, it rang true for other people. And I love when it does that. And when you have a twinkle in your eye, and a smile on your face, and adversity hits you from time to time, at least you can get up the next morning and laugh about something else.
Looking back now, how do you think you cope with the fame and notoriety that Alice's Restaurant brought you at such a young age and your first release, basically? Did you handle it well?
Well, it's been a long time since I've had the problem of fame and notoriety. That was decades ago. And, of course, in those days, I was in my 20s and life was good. I mean, I had starred in a major motion picture, Alice's Restaurant, based on the record that was selling very well, and the concerts were doing great, and when everybody sees your face, you can't just go sort of walking around in the supermarket or down the street without a lot of people saying something or recognizing you. And I mean, it was a problem, but I highly recommend it to anybody who can possibly pull it off. I mean, even in this day and age, it was really fun to be, a young man at a time when the world was exploding with new ideas and there were important things going on, and I loved it, and I sort of have now, my life is sort of calmed down to be a little normal. I can walk down the street, nobody knows who I am, except a couple of aging hippies here and there from time to time, and they just, give me a nice nod and a smile and a nice recognition, and that accounts for more than all the screaming, enthusiastic, fans of decades ago. So I think I dealt with it pretty well. It's faded into memory now, and then that's fine with me.
You redid Alice's Restaurant in the 90s. Was it a long-held feeling that within yourself that it needed updating?
It wasn't really a matter of updating it so much. When I first recorded Alice's Restaurant in 1967, we walked into a recording studio, sang the songs, and walked out. There was no take two. There was no let's do it again, or even let's learn the songs. I mean, we had a live audience in there, and I always thought that I had been doing the song and the other songs better in live performances than on that particular day in that studio. And I always wanted a chance to do it again. And aside from that, the producer of the first couple of my records was a guy named Fred Hellerman, who was in a group called the Weavers, of which Pete Seeger was a member. A wonderful guy, but of an earlier generation, and I didn't think he had the same sensitivity to, some of the material that I didn't know how to express myself at the time. So, after 30 years, on the 30th anniversary of the events that were described in the song, we went back into the very same church where it all took place and had another live audience, and we even rehearsed the songs, actually playing with some of my kids on that one, and we just did it again, and it was so nice. And I had the chance to update it a little bit, or at least to include some historical footnotes, which I thought might add another touch of humor to the song, and it's been doing really well.
What are your memories of Woodstock? I believe you weren't meant to go on at the time that you did.
It's funny, I was just in Woodstock yesterday.
Oh, really?
I can't believe it, just by coincidence, and I went back, and, here's all these people wandering around. It's still, to this day, the area is still sort of infused with the memories of that event. I can't believe it now. It's 30 years later. My own memories of it are, of course, clouded like everybody else's, not just because of the time that's passed, but because of the stuff we were doing those days, So I remember it being a wonderful occasion, and I remember getting there and, being flown in by helicopter and having these wonderful, at the same time, traumatic experiences. I'd never seen so many people in my life at one time, and to have to actually get up and play for them, perform, it was scary. I was trembling, and but I made the best of it, and I probably wasn't in the best shape, so at one time it was probably the worst performance of my life, and on the other side of the coin, it was the best moment. I obviously remember every moment of being up there. So yeah, you're right. I wasn't supposed to play when I did. Everybody's schedule got shifted around because of who was able to get there and what equipment was working at the time. It was a mass confusion that everybody was just trying to make the best of. And of course, it worked out so well that everybody really, for the most part, had a great time. And all the attempts at recreation have failed dramatically. And I love that too. It was like a gift that was given, that people have tried to repeat, and it's just impossible.
What have you thought of the subsequent Woodstocks that have tried to recreate that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think there were people for whom, who lost control of the original event. Not only monetarily, but, in every other sense. And they have been trying to regain control, maybe somewhere in their minds or their hearts or their pocketbooks. They've been trying to sort of to regain some degree of control over the situation, and every attempt has failed. And I thank God for that. I'm one who thinks it's important to recreate events any more than you can recreate a hurricane or a storm or something like that. These were moments that were very important to a lot of people around the world. It was at a time when our government here in the U.S. and other places around the world were telling everybody that if you had 50 hippies all together, there'd be riots and police actions, and people would get hurt and killed, stabbed, shot, whatever. And here we were, maybe 1 million people or so, and nobody was having any trouble. And all of the predictions of, about how our anarchy would rule the world if we let those people take over had just fallen short a little bit, because here we were the size of a city, maybe the third largest city in the state of New York at the time, and there was no crime. It was just people smoking dope and having a good time and doing all kinds of things that to this day we're still hearing the horrific tales of, if we live like that and act like them, the world will fall apart, we'll all go to hell, crime will be everywhere. And they're making up the same crap now that they were making up 30 years ago. And here we were, a whole lot of people who finally had a chance to say, you know what, you people are out of your minds. We're just going to enjoy each other, and we did. And I think it's still, for a lot of people around the world today, is a truth that just refuses to go away. And I think that's one of the reasons people are still asking about it.
Sure. Now, I'm not sure how accurate this quote is, but I read another interview with you where you stated that you felt you hadn't really released a good album until about 1976. Is that right?
Well, I think that the record we did in '76 was a record called Amigo.
Wonderful record.
And it's still probably one of my favorite recordings. I always thought, my history in the music industry, if you want to call it that, had really been one that was a little different than most people. When Alice's Restaurant came out in the late '60s, songs were not allowed to be played on the radio that were like over 2.5 minutes long. I mean, they just refused to play it. If it was 2 minutes and 31 seconds, they wouldn't play it. It didn't matter if it was the Beatles. It didn't matter if it was anybody. It might have been a few years earlier, but it comes from that era. And so to have a piece that was 18 minutes long meant that we were definitely doomed from getting any airplay. It just wasn't going to happen. And the next thing that happened was a song called Coming into Los Angeles, which was about things that most radio stations didn't want to play on their radio. So that was banned from most of the radio stations that were, it fit the time, but it didn't fit, the content. And the next one was a song that came along in the early 70s called City of New Orleans. And City of New Orleans was so different than what was being played on the radios in those days that it broke out of a little station in Atlanta. And Warner Brothers refused to believe that song could possibly actually go anywhere. And so they just sat on it. They never printed out, in those days, the 45s, the singles, until weeks after, it had already peaked on the radio play. It spread sort of like wildfire, and people were playing it because they just loved it from the album, which was unheard of. So I guess what I'm saying is that for most people, there are a lot of people who have like one hit, a one-hit wonder or something, and who have, some of them, sustained careers for decades. But I never even had a hit. I mean, I never had a song that was part of the industry in the normal sense. City of New Orleans came closest. It came into the sort of, close to the top of the charts back in those days. But I've never really been an industry sort of person. I've been out of the loop on that. And I still am to this day. We started our own record company back in the early 80s and have just pursued a career that is not really part of the recording industry. And so I guess what I'm saying is that it's my live performances that I've concentrated on. And so even though Amigo and some of the records we made in the 70s I thought were really terrific, they never really got a lot of distribution. And so I never really concentrated on a recording career, never made any money on records, but I did make a living doing shows and live performances, and I continue to do that, today.
Has having that low-key approach to your career in more recent times helped your songwriting, you think, with a little bit less pressure on you?
Oh, I know there is. I mean, there's more personal pressure on me because, we're still making records, obviously, and there's a certain audience out there around the world who's still interested in them, and luckily, because of the Internet, we've been able to, keep those recordings available, not just the stuff that we've made ourselves over the past few years, but even the old Warner Brothers stuff is still available through the Internet at our website. And now we're expanding into records that my kids are making, and that's terrific. And we're still continuing. We've got 3 or 4 records coming out later this year of just different projects and different ideas, and I love that. So it really hasn't affected me. The industry hasn't affected me personally. I've sort of let it go. The days when people who run the industry also happen to love music are gone.
Yeah.
These days, the industry is run by people who love money and know how to make it, and that's what it's all about. And so there's a whole there's a whole lot of musicians around the world now who have started just making their own records and their own CDs and marketing them through their own channels, and we've become a subculture that, frankly, is doing really well.
Was it a big job to get hold of your back catalogue, get the rights to your back catalogue?
No, not at all. I had friends at Warner Brothers who were very important there, and I always had a wonderful relationship with them. And when they let me go back in the early 80s, it wasn't, that they didn't like me. They just thought, hey, you're a folk singer, and we love what you're doing, but everybody wants to hear disco, So see you later, man. And I realized this was not a personal thing. This was business. And my friends, I still have a lot of friends in the industry, and I trust their judgment. They know whether they can sell stuff or not, and that's what they're there to do.
Someone you've had a long-standing relationship with, and who also was a contemporary of your dad's, is Pete Seeger. How would you sum up his influence on you?
Oh, I can't even say in words what Pete's influence has been on me. And unlike a lot of other people, who have had personal influence on me because of their stature as a human being, out of the generosity of their arts or their courage in the face of adversity, there are people who I've met who have really stood up from time to time about one thing or another, and who have enriched me as a human being. But Pete has not only done that, but he's also, I guess, the major influence in my, just being able to stand up on stage and know what to do with an audience. I've worked with him for 30 years, doing shows, annually at Carnegie Hall, and it was only up until a few years ago that we stopped doing those shows together because of his age. But, he's still out there. He's still playing. He's doing the smaller events, the sing-alongs, the Save the Water and Clean Up the river and all those kind of concerts that he's been doing forever. He's a real hero of mine in a personal sense, and not just as an entertainer, but as a human being. And I could go on talking about him for quite a long time, all of which would embarrass him greatly.
Yeah.
So I don't do it, when he's around. But I figure Australia is far enough away, you won't get wind of this at all.
You won't hear it, no. You've dabbled a little bit in acting over the years. Is that something you'd like to do more of?
Yeah, actually, I think next season I'll be back on TV. I can't tell you about it, but I'm looking forward to it. I love acting. For me, it's a vacation, and of course, all the other actors are very serious about this because it's their life, But when when I was doing a show called Birds of Paradise for television here about 4 or 5 years ago. It was on for one season, but it was a wonderful show. And of course, when it was over, everybody in the cast was scrambling for more work. I just went back to real work, I went back to playing on stage, and so yeah, I do love it. From time to time, it's a nice break. It's also a way to work with people in an ensemble rather than just be a performer on the stage when all the attention is focused on me personally. I like being part of a group effort to do something, and acting's one way to do that.
Something you've also dabbled in is children's books. Is that right?
Yeah, well, they just come to me. I'm not an advocate of those kinds of things. I like books that anybody can read, whether you're a child or not.
Yeah.
And one of the that I wrote just went on to become a major work in the sort of children's literature here, and still doing really well. It's a little book called Mooses Come Walking. There are 2 other children's books that are in the works now, and they're mostly the result of having my own kids and grandkids now, and realizing that these kinds of books or songs or whatever are really propaganda for getting kids to go to sleep on time, things like that, and they work.
Of course, your dad wrote some wonderful songs for kids, as have many folk performers over the years. What do you think it is about folk singers that have this knack of providing great material for kids?
Well, I think my dad's genius really was in being able to see the world through a child's eyes. He wrote some songs back 50 years ago now, 50 to 60 years ago. And, we've re-recorded them from time to time. We did a record a few years ago with all of my kids, and with the old recordings of my father, we sang along with him on the ones that he had recorded. And through the use of, high-tech recording technology, we were able to incorporate it all and sing along with him. And we did a thing called Woody's 20 Grow Big Songs. We're still doing it. It's still, I get letters from people who buy this thing and said, my kids love it. They actually listen to this. There are a lot of records and books out for kids that are good for them. My dad's songs was never good for anybody. They were just a part of somebody's life. And I love that. I don't like the material that's educational, that's self-esteem building. I hate all that stuff. I just like stuff that kids want to participate in and that, fill their imaginations with real, just wonderful feelings and stuff without trying too hard to do it.
Now, of course, there's another generation of Guthries coming through in music. Can you sum up their involvement for us?
Well, my son Abe and I have been working together for, on and off for many years. He has his own life, that he's fully engaged with. He has his own band called Xavier, and they've been playing together for a decade, and have been very successful as a sort of local, band. And these days they started touring with me, about a year ago. So Xavier's on the road with me at the moment. And about 2 years ago, my youngest daughter, Sarah Lee, decided to join us. She married a wonderful slide guitar player named Johnny Irion. And so now, when we do shows, there's a lot of people on stage singing and playing. Xavier's there with Abe. Sarah Lee's there with Johnny playing slide. And the show is it's the biggest band we've had on the stage for a long time. I have two other kids, two other daughters, and they run the business side of what we do. Thank God, because it's not anything I ever, knew about. The only problem is you can't fire them, and they don't even give me any money now. They just sort of send me out. But it's all in the family, and it's all in good fun, and I like how that happens. We're very close I'm very close to all of my kids. We all do work together. This is a family effort. This is not just me. And there are records coming out now. Johnny's coming out with his own record any day. It'll be out on our record company. And Sarah Lee's finishing up a project that her first record is almost done. Xavier is in the studio again, working on their third project. It's become a full-time, business for the whole family, and the nice thing is that everything that works for one person helps everybody else.
Yeah.
And I like that. In other words, we'll get somebody in the office there who knows how to, do the artwork for the CDs, and that's a full-time job now because there are so many things coming out just in the family. And it's like that in business as well, and it's kind of fun. It keeps everybody excited and interested in what everybody else is doing. They all work separately, from me, and when we have a chance, we all work together. And I've also been doing some shows on my own with symphony orchestras recently. That's also a nice thing. So my life is filled with shows just solo, shows with Abe and Xavier, shows with Abe, Xavier, and Sarah Lee and Johnny, shows with just Sarah Lee, orchestra shows with me and, symphony orchestras. I mean, every day it changes, and it keeps you on your toes. You can't establish a sort of relaxed pattern where you don't have to think about it anymore. So that's kind of good. It keeps you young.
Something I know also you're quite proud of there is the Guthrie Center. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, in the early 90s, about a decade ago, I was able to purchase the same church that was made famous in the song Alice's Restaurant and the subsequent movie. And I didn't mean to, I wasn't looking to buy anything. I was still working on a folk singer salary over here. But we were doing one of those Whatever Happened to Him TV shows, and these people were dragging me around and filming me at all these locations that were important, you know, in my life. And we were standing outside this old church that I hadn't really been to since the late 60s when the Alice's Restaurant movie came out. And my friends that had owned it had moved out, and different people had bought it and sold it and bought it, you know, and it became just a local sort of place where, you know, there wasn't anything really going on. There just people living from time to time. And while we were filming, the people came out who were there and said, "Arlo, we need to sell this place. We have to leave town." And I ended up with this wonderful old Gothic wooden New England church that figured really prominently in my life and was an icon to people through the film that we had made with Arthur Penn. And so I decided that the best use of that would probably be a not-for-profit thing. And so we set up a number of foundations. One is an educational foundation, and with that we, for example, we're doing a lot of shows with entertainers who may not otherwise have a place to play. Some of my old friends, you know, are coming and playing, and some young people who are learning their stuff. So this summer, for example, all this starting in about a week or two, there's concerts going on there every weekend. And also we have an interfaith church foundation. I'm really convinced that if people want the world to be safe, we have to learn to live together. And that means putting up with people whose tradition and whose idea of what's important may be different than yours. And so we work with a lot of people who are, you know, of a mind to make the world better, especially for people who are in a lot of trouble dealing with life and death issues, whether it's AIDS or cancer, you know, those kinds of things, or whether it's just the way we're brought up and dealing with the same old, you know, bigotries and prejudices that the world really could do better without. And so we work on all those kinds of things on a local level and a global one whenever we can. We're, you know, we want to have a sense of humor and develop a place where people can train or learn the disciplines that it's going to take for the future to continue safely. And that's what we try to do there.
Just a couple of quick things before we go. I was just wondering what you thought of the Mermaid Avenue projects of Billy Bragg and Wilco.
I love all the stuff. My sister Nora is the one who is really responsible for putting out and actually collecting, categorizing, saving all of my dad's work, and also finding new places for it to appear. So the stuff with Billy Bragg and Wilco I thought was just genius. Some of the songs of my fathers that they have put new music to have become Woody Guthrie standards. I mean, it's mind-boggling. But, you know, every year on my dad's birthday, which is around the 14th of July, there's a festival in Oklahoma where he was from, in the little town there of Okemah. And it's a free festival. People just come and play for free, and people come and listen for free. And it's been a really wonderful thing that was started a few years ago. And everybody feels obligated at some point to sing some kind of Woody Guthrie songs because the festival is sort of in his name, in his hometown. And it's wonderful to hear that some of the new songs from these records, the Mermaid Avenue projects, and there are some others that are coming out soon, some of these songs have become standards alongside of Hard Travelin' or This Land Is Your Land, or, you know, some of the ones that everybody knows over here anyway. There are songs like California Stars or Way Over Yonder in the Minor Key that have become Woody Guthrie classics, and only in the last few years. My dad is more popular now than he's ever been in his lifetime, and I think he's getting a kick out of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. have to talk about your website, too. It's one of the most extensive artist websites around. How much direct involvement do you have in that?
It was started by a fan some years ago, and I got... he sent me a little note one day backstage saying, check this out. And, of course, I'm a computer fanatic and grew up... I have a cousin who was one of the originators at MIT of developing, like computer... chess and things like that, and so they go back in our family, and so I was computer savvy enough to, in the early days of the internet, figure out how to contribute, and I thought, this is wonderful. Here's a guy that just loves our stuff and was willing to, put up pictures or arrange for things we thought were important, like announcements or a place where people could find out where we were playing, and has developed into, there's a whole world in there now. You could get lost in there for weeks.
Oh, you could.
I mean, there's way too much stuff. I keep trying to tell him to get stuff out of there, but he won't do it, and it's not our website. I mean, it is our official website in the sense that the concert dates, the recordings, all of the links to other important things. There are links to the church. There are links to our business stuff, and as well as all of our personal interests. Now there are links to Sarah Lee's website, to Abe's, Xavier website, and all of our friends and teachers, people who are important to us. So there's a whole world of stuff there, and frankly, the nice thing is that as the record companies, as the recording industry or the entertainment industry becomes sort of more obsolete, each individual website becomes more important. And for the artists around the world who are able to bring their stuff to a global market through the internet, I am so thrilled to be a part of that. And of course, it gives you a way to explore what's going on everywhere. We have people, from all over the world, and obviously, especially from Australia, where we've actually toured from time to time,
yep.
Who take a day-to-day interest in communicating with others, and we have a global community that's talking to each other on a daily basis through the website. I love that.
An outstanding piece of work. It's a great site. Listen, Arlo, I'll have to let you go. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute treat speaking to you.
Well, thank you. And I'm looking forward to getting back there someday.
Oh, you're always a welcome visitor. I've got wonderful memories of your past trips, so we'd love to see you down here again.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you for calling, and we'll see you sometime. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Arlo.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.